Remember, hip-hop is the culture, rap is the art form. Though, a rap can also be referred to as a hip-hop verse, a term we'll definitely be getting into. So when people ask if hip-hop is poetry, what they are really asking is rap a form of poetry? And we're going to answer that in this video with facts. Please note, this video is not about whether rap is a great or horrible art form. We're not here to defend or assail the culture itself. This episode is about using predetermined definitions, rules, and attributes to answer the question, is hip-hop poetry? If you haven't seen or you've forgotten about our very first episode, here is a quick refresher. Poetry is a written and oral tradition composed of rhythmical words describing an experience or something of one's imagination in a way deemed beautiful and more concentrated than ordinary speech. So let's see how rap holds its weight up against the definition of a poem. First, a rap can be written, so it is correct to say it is a written and oral tradition. Indeed, it is composed of rhythmical words. Raps have been used for various reasons, all of which can be defined as describing an experience or something of one's imagination. I don't deem all poems beautiful, and I don't deem all raps beautiful, but there are definitely a lot I do find appealing, and for the ones I don't like, there are others who do like them. So if this aspect of the definition works for poems, it can be applied to raps. Last, more concentrated than ordinary speech. Of course this describes a rap. It is made up of lyrics, which in itself is more concentrated than ordinary speech. Unless someone finds fault with the definition we used for poetry, I think it is safe to say, from this perspective, rapping falls under the umbrella of poetry. But let's see how it stacks up against other forms.
Shall we begin?
First, a rap is made up of metered lines that rhyme. In hip-hop, a metered line is referred to as a bar. 1 meter equals 1 bar. Or 4 bars equals 4 meters, etc. The number of bars vary, but one of the more popular utilized verses contains 16 bars, with anywhere from 1 to 8 different end rhymes. In our alliteration and rhyme video, we defined what an end rhyme is. The end rhyme, also known as a tail rhyme, is the rhyming of the final syllable of a line. I walked out the door to go to the store, thinking it was my last chore, but I actually had more. This is a silly example I just wrote for this, but it obviously points out the rhymes appear at the tail end of the lines. You know what else contains 16 metered lines with 8 different rhymes? Meredithian sonnet is 16 lines, consisting of 4 quatrains with 8 different rhymes. But I know, a rap contains multiple individual verses which stand on their own, but also interconnect. Something like... A sonnet sequence is a group of sonnets which are unified to create a longer piece of work. Each sonnet should be able to stand alone as well as add to the larger piece. A sonnet cycle is the same thing. The next thing I want to mention, I've actually already mentioned. For those of you who are wondering if I'm purposely avoiding the musical aspect to rap, thousands of years ago, these odes were performed with musical accompaniment, a chorus, and dancing. Yes, my fellow spoken word artists, we were by far not the first to do this. The word ode means to sing or chant. When we researched all of the major English dictionaries for a definition of poetry, we realized, out of the 6 definitions given, 4 of them mention sound or spoken word. 3 out of the 6 mention experience. 4 out of the 6 mention imagination, or it having to be imaginative. 3 out of the 6 mention emotion and feelings. 6 out of the 6 mention rhythm, that they are written in a rhythmic format. Rhythm. Poetry in itself is rooted in and continues to flourish with music, hence the importance of rhythm. Does adding music to a poetic spoken word piece make it less of a poem? What about my fellow Americans who are patriotic? You sing the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. But did you know the lyrics are from a poem called Defense of Fort McHenry by Francis Scott Key? Poetry was born out of and has been nourished by music. Though, I've read hip-hop verses and listened to people rap without any musical accompaniment. And real quick, I'd like to mention freestyles, which are improv verses, aka they are made up on the spot. Sorry, hip-hop. There is a long list of poets who've been doing this for ages, including those from Japan. Now, A renga, which means collaborative poetry, consists of at least 2 stanzas, or ku. Traditional renga was a group activity where each poet spontaneously wrote a verse which continued and was in response to the verse that came before. It is similar to the concept of what a hip-hop freestyle cipher looks like today. Poetry Defined, help keep our grind, and please subscribe to Poetry Defined.
Stop rapping. You are many things, but you are not a rapper.
Sorry. Please share, like, and subscribe to Poetry Defined. Remember I said a rap can also be referred to as a hip-hop verse, a term we'll definitely be getting into. Poems are made up of verses. In our highlighted phrase, hip-hop is the adjective, just like blank is the adjective in blank verse. In fact, it can probably be successfully debated that a hip-hop verse is more poetry than a free verse is. Structurally speaking, of course.
This is not a drill.
For me, there shouldn't even be a debate on whether a hip-hop verse falls under poetry or not. It clearly does. So what does the opposition say? One of the popular arguments is poetry doesn't need music. Rap does. Indeed, music is most often used when rapping, but it need not be present in order for one to call something a hip-hop verse. Those unfamiliar with hip-hop, or whose knowledge of it comes from commercialism, don't know that. In fact, there are thousands of people online who battle and collaborate purely with text. Before then, it was notes in class being passed. But I must ask, are these same naysayers willing to tell academia that Greek odes aren't poetic because of the musical accompaniment? Are the last poets demoting their work from poems to not poems because of the musical accompaniment? Some dislike the content. So does that mean it isn't poetry? Okay, but the same can be applied to poems as well. We spoke about this. If someone writes a low-quality sonnet, does it mean it is technically not a poem? Rap and poetry are equally affected by this rule. But who is to decide what is low and high quality? The individual audience member. That's who. Sure, there are definitely hip-hop verses which are not safe for work or kids. But Walt Whitman, Anne Sexton, and Charles Bukowski, who are all celebrated poets, have numerous poems which are not work or family friendly. Next, it is more so an audible art form as opposed to a written one. Man, I'ma let my homie Bobby Ice answer this. Thanks, Bobby. I don't even have to use performance poetry as an example now. The last argument I'd like to address deserves its own conversation, but we had to get this into the episode, and we're going to keep it somewhat concise. There are some who believe the attempt to call rap a form of poetry is our way of trying to give rap some artistic validity, that we shouldn't be insecure and that we should allow rap to just be its own thing. Whoa! Rap does not need poetry's approval to exist or flourish. It never has. In fact, hip-hop the culture in itself was born out of a community that was ostracized, to say the least. It was by and for the people of that community, an oppressed community who turned inward for validation. There were no Skype calls to the English department at Cambridge University asking for acceptance. There are many literary devices and forms which need not be considered poetry in order for them to be valued. Whether a sestina is considered a poem or not, you're not going to like it any more or less. If sonnets, with or without musical accompaniment, and America's national anthem, and Gil Scott-Heron's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised are not poetry, and Robert Frost's quote about the ear being the poet's best writer, and Anne Sexton's own style of liberating literature is wrong, then, my friends, we are left with an unavoidable conclusion. We must redefine the word poetry if it is to be that a hip-hop verse is never able to be considered a poem.
Is that all you got? Is that all you got? Is that all you got? Is that all you got?
In conclusion, as far as us little people over here at Poetry Defined are concerned, rap is a form of poetry. This does not mean you have to like it or dislike it. This does not mean it is one of the best or worst forms of poetry. All of that is for the individual to decide. Be sure to check out many of our other episodes. We hope you found this one engaging, and let us know in the comments where you stand on this issue. Is rap a form of poetry? As always, my friends, we graciously thank you for watching Poetry Defined. When different vowels appear within identical consonant pairs. This can be seen in the words block and black, rod and red. Another example. How about the oath one must take in court? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.